This is the field of the unknown, the strange and fantastic, the horrific and amazing. You're listening to Cryptozoological Talk on the RRN, and Salem is listening. Thank you everyone for subscribing to this channel and following us on social media. If you're listening from Grants Pass to Portland, from Portland to Crater Lake to Salem, we're glad you are here. This segment of the Ropen Radio Network would like to give a shout out to the good people of Operation Underground Railroad. Hope is the driving force behind their work. It is the result of countless individuals uniting to make a difference. It is the tireless efforts of operators worldwide. It is a courageous battle of survivors as they heal and thrive. It is the pivotal moment when a survivor steps out of captivity and begins their journey towards freedom. This is a celebration of 10 years of unwavering commitment to the fight against human trafficking and sexual exploitation. Throughout the past decade, we have dedicated ourselves to empowering survivors and eliminating this atrocious crime on a global scale. As we mark these milestones, we promise to continue this noble mission, helping survivors fulfill their dreams and aspirations. Come together with us to honor this extraordinary journey and work towards a brighter future for survivors where hope conquers fear. Go to ourrescue.org and learn how you too can make a difference in a child's life. That's ourrescue.org. Garth Guessman is joining me on the Ropen Network today. Good to have him back. How you been, by the way?
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
Yes. And Corey's doing well too.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Perfect.
Doing well.
Let's dive into our subject for today, shall we? Over the past decades, rural America would seem has been the subject of strange and unexplained. The phenomena that plagues these smaller towns has eluded the larger metroplex areas. What is it about these farmlands, these back roads of heartlands of America, that draw in the supernatural? No doubt over the century we have heard plenty of cases involving strange places, strange people, and strange visitations. Such is the case for the city of Van Meter, Iowa, located just outside of Des Moines, 20 minutes to be exact. The events that took place in late September, early October, forever resonated throughout Iowa. The amazing encounters quickly became the subject of fear and legend. It did happen in 1903. Fast forward to about 110 years later, and we have an investigation which was later published as a book, documented by Chad Lewis, Noah Voss, and Kevin Lee Nelson in 2013, titled The Van Meter Visitor. So, when I think of something like this, Garth, it's easy to think that maybe what we're really just dealing with is mistaken identity. That this is indeed some sort of flying creature that you and I are both very familiar with. But there's some other things here that are questionable, that raise an eyebrow. As you and I know, is there a backstory to some of these smaller towns? And I know that Van Meter is considered a city, but it sure doesn't look like a city. And I'm not trying to be harsh with that at all, but it looks very small. And being a part of some of these older towns over the years, going out there and seeing them for myself, I have to wonder, is there any kind of superstition that takes part or is a part of that time period? Let's keep something in mind, folks. 1903, pre-1903, which means the pioneer days, the settlers. Let me ask you this question, Garth. Do you know about Freemasonry?
Yes.
Okay. In your personal opinion, what is Freemasonry?
Well, from what I heard, from people that have come out of Freemasonry and have been able to really tell us what they were taught, it's based on a series of teachings that you swear not to tell anybody, with some pretty severe oaths, like cut your throat kind of oaths if you tell. And it's basically a Luciferian religion They don't see Lucifer as the devil like Christians do, and there's different degrees. Initially, you don't know anything about that, and at the 30th degree, you are formally told that Lucifer is our God, and that we worship him. And then the 33rd degree is the final degree of Masonry, and that's at that point you're a Shriner. That's about the gist of what I am familiar with.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, what? I better interrupt on this one, okay? I'm not implying that Van Meter is riddled with Freemasons, okay? But what Garth just said to me is very new, because I haven't heard it like that. Now, on the surface, these people believe that what they're doing is a noble cause. You see their plaques clearly showcased in these smaller rural towns. To start off, a little bit of history with Van Meter. Population 400 in 1903. Current population is now 1,400. So it took it over a century for the population to really
growing
climb.
In leaps and bounds.
Yeah. And a lot of people who have spent their time there would tell you that, hey, this is a small town. We love it, and we don't prefer to live anywhere else. I like smaller towns. That's why I like venturing towards these places. But there is no background involving superstition that I could find pre-1903, when all these accounts began to happen. Of course, if you travel around, folks, around the world, superstition is going to be in pretty much every community, but it may not be in large numbers. It could be just a small amount of people who believe in superstition. There are, however, cases involving cryptids, but not in Van Meter alone, in the entire state of Iowa. For instance, there was a case with a lake monster that was seen out there, and back in the 1890s, in the state of Iowa. And the most famous case is a bridge that others reported seeing a wild man. So when I went and did some digging, I found out that this wild man isn't a wild man at all. It's some sort of wolf-like creature, bipedal. I think we all know where that goes, okay? And another potential being living on a bridge or in this bridge area with water, dimensional pull, okay? So there is some background there involving cryptids, not necessarily superstition. Most of these accounts are chronicled in this book here, The Van Meter Visitor, which is an excellent book. I did have a chance
to get that book. I would like to get that book. Yeah, it's something that's right up my alley. I don't even know why I don't have it yet.
It's one of those that definitely should be in the library. And something we're going to tackle with this book that is not mentioned, that you and I are very familiar with, is the pterosaur phenomena. I'm shocked that it is not mentioned here. There's a picture, there's a word, but nothing else. Surprising from fellow investigators who go looking for cryptids, okay? I was really, really surprised at that. Nonetheless, I did reach out to Chad Lewis. He mentioned that he would love to be on the show if his schedule permitted. Now, he was in the process of working up 2 other books and doing another investigation. So unfortunately, I was not able to get him on the show due to that. His schedule did not get more open for him. But he wished us the very best. I said I'd be happy to mention his name, mention the gentleman who worked on this whole investigation with him. They did a fantastic job, and the community was very open to their visit. And now, Mr. Chad Lewis runs every September in Van Meter, Iowa. You can go to the Van Meter Festival, where they will journey with you during the night and show you all the places of where these accounts began and when they ended.
Definitely some parallels to the things that I've been researching and have seen with my own eyes. Definitely some parallels here.
Yes, it is. And all these encounters are very special, very unique. When you have smaller towns and when you have encounters that happen over multiple nights and you have multiple eyewitnesses, it's worthy of investigation. These are the most exciting ones to dive into. As long as it doesn't lead you down a dark, sinister path, of course. We don't want that. So let's dive into these encounters together.
Tuesday early morning, September 29th, 1903. There was much to do in 1903 for the well-heeled, or at least the daring and adventurous. January premiered the production of The Wizard of Oz on Broadway after the wild success of the book released only 3 years prior. Visitors to Niagara Falls would have been disappointed in March as it ran dry due to the drought sweeping parts of the country. Very interesting.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The summer heat did make a great opportunity for new companies by the name of Pepsi to market its product. And if you were lucky enough to pick up one of the Ford Motor Company first cars, the new Model A, released in July, you could have even driven to the nearest theater to watch the premiere of America's first Western film, Kit Carson.
It had been a warm start to autumn with just the right amount of rain. Local Van Meter resident U.G. Griffith would have been able to take advantage of the nice weather on Monday to make his rounds, selling different tools throughout the area. Warm days and cool but comfortable nights are those of light jackets and light discomforts, often affording one the luxury of taking in their surroundings with a relaxed perspective. As the area's implement dealer, Mr. Griffin must have made his trip countless times for his job. This early Tuesday morning was different. As he pulled into his hometown of Van Meter at the all-too-often solitary time of 1 a.m., he noticed something different. His attention was drawn to the top of Martha and Greg's building. On the roof was something unusual and out of place. There was a light where there had not ever been one before. As Mr. Griffith continued down the road, he drew nearer to the light. He worked through the logical possibilities of what the light could have been. One of the first thoughts was troublesome one, assuming it might be burglars. As his thoughts passed into his mind, he cautiously approached closer. Before he was able to draw very near to the building, something unexpected happened. He must have been relieved yet startled when the light mysteriously moved across the street. It was suddenly clear that he didn't worry about burglars any longer, but he was confounded as to what he had been watching. The light appeared on the roof of another building except for the opposite side of the street. His thoughts must have quickened, if not his heart, with this new observation. What? He would have wondered to himself, and how could something have moved like that? As quickly as the unusual light appeared and mysteriously moved across the street, it simply disappeared altogether. Eventually reaching his home in Van Meter, I imagine that Mr. Griffin drifted off to sleep, his mind still circling with unexplained light. Okay, so he's the first person to have encountered this strange glow. It doesn't specify if it's like what kind of glow it is. Like maybe like an orb manifestation, just a light, but it moved so fast. And you and I, when we talked about these things, you mentioned sometimes they move very quickly. And sometimes I've seen them where they're actually just very slow. Is that still the case with you? Is that about right? You say they can move quick?
Everything that this is just mentioned, I've seen with my own eyes. So I don't know if this was the exact creature or the same phenomenon, but the creatures I've seen can do this. Something far beyond frenzied fear was to come, and it arrived with feared fashion the next night. Fevered fashion the next night. The sun set on Van Meter as any other day. Darkness blanketed the area by 6:30 that evening. The local town doctor was Dr. Alcott. He kept a room in the rear of his office. Thunderstorms rumbled and flashed on the western horizon as Dr. Alcott prepared for bed. Perhaps a dark and stormy night ensued. In a terrifying moment, the doctor was torn from his slumber by the bright light shining in his face. He must have immediately recognized the shock of adrenaline, creating his instant alertness. Known as a plucky little fellow, he and his heart raced from bed as his skilled hands wrapped around his nearby, quote, gun of immense proportions, unquote. So, a 12-gauge shotgun is pretty standard. So I imagine this was like a 10-gauge or bigger. That's just my speculation there. Then they have a picture here of the historic Van Meter, Iowa, with streets view of a automobile. Probably a rare view, right?
Yeah. The famous building. Yeah.
So
that's
it says,
one that was depicted.
Clearly this was not a light the doctor recognized. He instantly knew no one was seeking his help for a medical emergency, or simply stopping by at an odd hour, peeking in to see if he was awake. This was different. Wasting no time and feeling the empowering effects of adrenaline mixed with what must have been annoyance by whomever awoke him, he ran outside the building to confront this conundrum. The ground still wet from the passing showers and the air filled with the familiar smell of freshly fallen leaves.
Okay.
He was challenged with something or other that seemed beyond his years of experience. Standing behind the source of light, Dr. Alcott could make out a half-human, half-animal that displayed even more mind-boggling traits, such as great bat-like wings. This strange creature before him continued to baffle his racing mind. The doctor could start to see what the light was, where the light was coming from, and it only muddied his mysterious visitor more. In the center of the creature's forehead grew a single blunt horn. The light seemed to be somehow emanating from this blunted horn. The doctor was close to the creature at this point and felt the only course of action was to slay the mysterious and monstrous source of light. Gripping his gun firmly, the doctor fired at the monster, not only once or twice, to be sure, but 5 fearful shots were hurled at the beast.
Okay.
He must have had to quickly rethink his initial approach after not even one of the shots had a noticeable effect. With only one remaining shot left, Dr. Alcott quickly retreated back into his office. Once safe inside, the feeling was fleeting. The doctor quickly locked the doors and frantically moved to do the same to the windows. Sleep was not likely easy to come, and likely with the gun in his hand. Dr. Alcott eagerly awaited the comfort of light brought on by the morning. Wow.
Interesting. Clearly we have somebody here that's well known in the community, again, respected. So Dr. Alcott, this particular sighting started at 12:27 a.m., half human, half animal. Again,
he said it was
morning.
the half hour before was the 12:27. So it was around 1 a.m.
1 a.m. Excellent. Okay. A lot of these beings tend to come in the AM hours, but then we know some of these other creatures are nocturnal. Okay. But Garth, he shot at it 5 times?
I know. It seemed to be hard to miss when you're that close. But there have been some famous shootouts where nobody got shot. And they were that close. It's hard to
That's
say.
so
It
odd.
does say that his shot was fearfully made. 5 fearful shots. So he had adrenaline against him at that point. It's hard to say
Okay.
If it was a real creature and it was not a spirit, then yeah, all I could say is there is that slim chance he could have missed, or he didn't hit anything vital and the creature was able to continue.
Well, I would be thinking that if we're talking about something with monstrous wings, I mean, if you shoot that wing, wouldn't that rip into that membrane? And then that thing's going to have a hard time flying. You shoot like a bird, you hit that wing, it's done. It's not going to be able to fly.
Let me get something real quick. So if you look at this body shape, just look at the body. It's kind of a human-shaped body. And the arms, they're very human-like in a sense. They're anatomically, they're not too far from being human-like. I'm just saying, other than the head, the oversized head, the head's very large. But, the body's basically a human's kind of body. If you were to stand up, you would be about similar height on the average pterosaur. But we cannot rule out other possibilities. I get that.
Wednesday, September 30th, 1903. With such uniquely unexplainable night, the doctor would have to share with someone. Those who heard Dr. Alcott's tale must have had disbelief written on their faces. How could someone such as the town doctor be so trusted with the well-being of others and tell the tale of such a terrifying encounters in the darkest of the night? I'm going to pause on this one for a sec because he's staring at the creature on the cross beam.
Yes.
A cross member. Okay, here's a big question I have. Maybe you can answer this, all right? Can a large creature, we do not know the size just yet, be perched on something like a cross member of a telephone pole that you see in this image? Depending on the size, how much weight can those things hold? Now, I know the pole itself can support 1,000 pounds, but what about that cross section? Maybe that's a question to ask someone who's a railroadman.
Or a lineman. Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I don't think that's
Now,
an
let's
issue.
just assume.
I don't, me personally, I see that that's feasible. Maybe under certain circumstances, it might not be able to hold up or it would rotate. But I think in general, I think it's pretty stout. Scarcely 15 feet away, the now determined Mr. White took deliberate aim. And as with many good marksmen, in one slow exhale, he pulled the trigger and fired. The creature did not fall to the ground, or as the ordinary good shot Mr. White was expecting. Instead, at that very moment, he fired instantaneously. Its light was turned on him. The shot from his gun didn't have any effect on the creature other than to wake it up. His heart had to jump at this terrifying realization. He may have had no way to defend himself from this monster. Mr. White recalled a powerful odor suddenly filling the air. The odor was emitted from the monster, according to Mr. White, and was so strong it seemed to stupefy him. Oddly enough, in an experience already past capacity for unusual, he could remember no more about that night. As the shot rang out, it awoke neighbor Sidney Gregg. Gregg tore himself from his slumber, raced towards the door to see what the commotion was all about. As he opened the door and peered towards Main Street, he was met with the most curious Creation Descending the telephone pole, Mr. Gregg was afforded a different view of the creature as he was sleeping in his store that is just across the corner from where O.V. White had viewed the monster from Mr. Gregg watched on in dumbstruck disbelief as the monster descended the telephone pole after the manner of a parrot using its huge beak. Once upon the ground, it stood erect. And by Mr. Gregg's estimate, it was at least 8 feet high. Whatever it was, the light from its forehead was as bright as an electric headlight. The light again darted about, just as it had the nights before, when the visitor came to see Peter Dunn and Dr. Alcott, seemingly in a searching motion. So Mr. Gregg could have been under a more diluted daze than of O.V. White from the cryptic stench. But he continued to watch on, doing his best to process this entirely baffling being, even as it flapped its great featherless wings. With the flapping of its wings, the creature took giant leaps, almost like that of a kangaroo. Just then, as if an answer to a silent question racing through Mr. Gregg's mind, am I dreaming?
The sightings are consistent. They keep saying large, and they keep talking about a horn in the center. And they keep talking about a glowing light. Clearly, we're talking about something that's flying. What stands out to me is the fact that it came down the pole like a parrot. They grab.
Yeah.
They kind of.
Yeah. So,
very interesting.
We got a couple things here. If this is a spirit, some kind of a demonic entity, I just don't see him sleeping on the pole. And I don't see him climbing down the pole in that fashion if he gets shot at. I just don't see bullets intimidating spirits. This at least got this creature to move differently. He didn't fly. He could have easily flown off that thing. What if he was hit and not penetrated? And so he maybe couldn't fly, and he had to climb down and walk until that major Charlie horse was absent enough where he can scamper off and finally fold out his wings and get going. It's unusual that he would fly after he got down, as opposed to taking advantage of the height and flying right off there. Usually birds
you pointed that
just
out.
Jump and they spread out their wings and they go for a descending takeoff, and it's very easy for birds to do that. Even if you're, not startled, birds can do that.
And again, we're assuming that these encounters are true, that these men are telling us the truth about what they're seeing and how this creature is moving, how it's interacting with them.
Sometimes we have evidence that Satan and his demons and fallen angels can enter into an animal and take control of it and use it. So we have to at least be open to the possibility that, this could be purely spirit. This could be demon-possessed animal. And I'm saying demon-possessed meaning, the fallen angel, demons, whatever it is, that could be controlling it. Or could it just be an unusual animal, nothing to do with spirits at all? So all these possibilities are open. They're on the table. We don't want to rule any of them out, but as we get more and more data, we can, see what the facts align with best.
Okay. And then go ahead and make your point that you were wanting to say.
It's actually based on the first incident where the Griffith is walking into town and sees a light on the roof. And he's like confused. What's that? A burglar? Somebody up there on the roof? It's 1 a.m. And then as he's trying to figure it out, the light goes out, and the same light appears on the roof across the street. I've seen that. And I've also seen this directional light, which is unusual. I've only seen it twice. I've experienced it once myself, and I had another situation that indicated, based on collaboration with other researchers, that there may have been a directional light. You have thoughts? Go ahead.
Well, as I'm hearing this testimony, it makes me just consider all this and how it lines up. It lines up with these gentlemen's encounters. Okay. As far as how the light goes and maybe how this animal looks or this creature looks and how it's moving. So it starts to open up the doors. Open up the channels here about what this thing really is. I really think we're finally coming to that, especially with the testimony you have, testimony of others when it comes to these strange phantom lights, or that could very well be pterosaurs. Well, we got to take a quick break here, Garth. Give a shout out to some local companies here. You're listening to Cryptozoological Talk on the RRN, Ropen Radio Network. We'll be right back with Garth Guessman and the visitor of Van Meter.
Hey everyone, Matt Osborne with Operation Underground Railroad. We are running a campaign to raise funds for a cyber crimes lab on the campus of Indiana State University. This lab will be furnished with state-of-the-art equipment and will give students real-world experience in performing intelligence collection and analysis on human traffickers and human trafficking rings. We piloted a similar program on the campus of Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia, and had incredible results. We're so impressed with the students, the faculty, administration, and local law enforcement in Huntington, West Virginia. We know we can replicate this in Terre Haute and on the campus of Indiana State University. Thus far, we've only raised about half of the funds needed, and we need your help. Please be a part of this groundbreaking initiative to help us fight human trafficking and child exploitation in the United States. Thank you so much for all you have done, are doing, and will hopefully do to support Operation Underground Railroad, and specifically this cybercrimes lab on the campus of Indiana State University. Thank you so much for all of your support.
Join the fight by going to Operation Underground or ourrescue.org. Your exclusive home for cryptozoological talk, the RRN, Salem, Oregon. Let's seek the truth. This book here, chronicled by Chad Lewis. And I have Garth Guessman as my co-host today. We've been going over this strange anomaly. Is it really a spirit, or is this actually flesh and blood? After hearing Garth, I'm starting to change my mind a bit, because I wasn't sure what to really sum this up with my final thoughts. But I'm starting to this is where it's important to have others on this show. With their personal experiences, they've know more because they've been out there and seen these lights for themselves. And it does fit with this information. Garth, you were telling us more about your encounter with these lights. I'd like you to be able to finish that before we go on and try to wrap up this show.
Yeah, the that experience I had with the natives, my 2 native guides that stayed up with me that night when I was in the Monster Quest program collecting the video footage. All the TV crew had gone to bed. We stayed up late, and we saw a directional light on the other side of a ridge. It was able to move with agility back and forth. It went from an omnidirectional light and just that fast went to a directional light. So it went from a simple light bulb of all directions to a light pointing in a very specific direction with focus. The Van Meter creature had a directional light. Very unusual. I can see why nobody could and you can even see it in the writing itself. Even accepting what is being shown to them, they're trying to wrap their minds, what on earth is this? But they fail to consider what the Bible says in Isaiah 30, verse 6, that in Egypt during the time of Isaiah, there were fiery flying serpents. And the word fiery is the word for light bearing, the giving of light. It was applied to angels and to this reptile that flew. It was the same word, seraphim. Seraphim means burning ones, fiery ones, or you could think of it as lit up ones.
Yeah. Agree. Pivotal information that was missed. Mm-hmm. But Brian's encounter stood out to me because he identified the elastine bundles in the wing in his drawings.
Yeah.
That's rare because usually pterosaurs don't possess that, according to paleontologists.
Kind of right here.
They're not supposed to have that.
Right here in this area, the metacarpals of the hand, you have supporting structures here and here in Brian Sass's sighting. Not necessarily bone, but some kind of perhaps cartilage or keratin, a thicker portion where light was not able to get through the membrane. And so the wings were lit up in the front, and he could see translucent membranes behind that and thicker, darker portions in the translucent membrane.
Excellent. Excellent information. And folks, I want to actually reiterate on this again. If you are watching the broadcast, you are going to want to head over to the Spotify account and listen to the full show. You don't want to miss any of this information. Our broadcasts are condensed, but our Spotify shows are the full thing. So make sure you head over there as well. Garth, let's continue on to these encounters. Saturday early morning, October 3rd, 1903, the old coal mine on the edge of town had been shut down a few years prior to the unusual events a past week in Van Meter. There was, however, a functioning and tile and brick factory on the same grounds, and operations manager J.L. Platt, Jr. was there this early Saturday morning. The rain still decided ever so often to start and stop, as well as the mysterious noises emanating from the old mine shafts. As 1 a.m., approached, almost as one cue, the sounds from the mine shaft drew J.L. Platt Jr. to the edge. The moon was nearly full, and when the not so obstructed by passing rain clouds would have afforded Mr. Platt Jr. to peer down just a bit further into the dark borehole. These mine shafts can drop down hundreds of feet with many twists and turns off in every direction of a straight drop with no turns at all. Oftentimes there can be 100-foot drops or more to a bitterly cold and belligerent dark water column that not only can be another 100 feet deep, but also polluted with the worst runoff. And chemical concoctions from when the mine was active. Add to that the deadly gases that can fill them and either explode with the slightest spark or silently suffocate anyone foolish enough to draw so near as to fall in. This sheds some light for me for later on. J.L. Platt Jr. was used to these mine shafts, and as he drew near to the eerily familiar sounds, they were faint no longer. The echo of Satan and the imps was in full glory, still preparing for their forthcoming battle. This time, however, the disturbing sounds did not stop, and in the flash of a moment, the monster appeared at the entrance. The shocking moment was not over, as directly behind the first monster there appeared another, somewhat smaller one. They both gave off the brilliant light that was as striking as it was blinding. J.L. Platt Jr. would have been just one of many witnesses to the creatures, as all the men working the tile and brick factory were nearby, some 40 rods, about 660 feet away. A few of the braver, however, would have likely approached the mine entrance behind J.L. Platt Jr. Mr. Pratt did have a good look at the monsters as they flew past, noticing their horn-like protuberance emanating the extraordinary light as they sailed away into the dark. Again, the encounters, the descriptions, it lines up. As chilling as the experience may have been for the men present, they took comfort in their accidental discovery that could rid them and the town of Van Meter from monsters they had just discovered their lair. I'll keep going. The latest sighting of the mine shaft would have spread speedily through the town, even at the odd hour. Men gathered their brimmed hats and raincoats for protection from the rain as they hatched a hasty, nefarious plan of ambush for the monsters.
Nothing returned to the old mine area through the night, even though the watch never wavered. Just when the depression of defeat was starting to seep into the psyche of the men, someone noticed something. Perhaps it was the breaking of dawn at 5:46 a.m. and the warm, comforting colors that began to return to the sky that allowed the dark figure, 8-foot-tall creature with huge bat-like wings, to be spotted as it approached the old mine. Not far behind was the second creature, sighted a few hours earlier. The men who were still gathered at the mine fired shots. In a moment, there considerable gunfire countless times at the beast. It must have sounded like an explosion erupting from the mine area to the rest of Van Meter. But now, just slumbering awake in their homes, beds still warm, it is recounted that the reception received would have sunk the Spanish fleet. I like the hyperboles they're using. They use a lot of hyperboles, Satan and his imps and, all these major terms, sinking the Spanish fleet with the amount of gunfire they were putting out. Okay. The creature added to the chaotic situation with their own thunderous, unearthly noises in response to the bullets. Then the particular odor returned as if released from the monsters. The men who laid in wait would have sent bullets down range to the monsters as fast as they could shoot. The same men were forced to watch in bewildered trepidation as the unaltered monsters casually and slowly descended the shaft of the old mine. As the last man fired his last bullet, I imagine a surreal silence befalling the entire grounds of the factory.
Saturday, October 3rd, 1903. As the tale of terrorizing events at the factory and old mine undoubtedly burned through the town like an uncontrollable wildfire, action needed to be taken. If only talking about action to quell the fear before it built to full-scale panic, it was still needed. The town is all Yeah. The town is all excitement, and a force of men has been set to work to barricade the mouth of the mine. A logical response to what seems to be a creature that calls the mine home during the day and is impervious to bullets in the night. Locking up the monster in the mine like a cage seems like a good next step for those wanting to quickly and quietly place the previous week's events into the forgotten history of Van Meter. The townsfolk discuss several methods of exterminating the monsters, but nothing seems to meet the approval of those in charge. From here, we are left to wonder even more blindly, did they get the mine opening barricaded before nightfall? If so, did the creatures find another way out? Or are their skeletons still deep inside the mine to this day? Touch on two things here real fast. Thunderstorms and odor. Now, people say when they see an evil spirit or feel one, there's a smell of odor. Sometimes like sulfur, Garth, from what I remember. I think it just could be the animal's smell. That's a possibility. It's just we have to factor in the case
we actually have smells from these creatures.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Jane Bates, the researcher, she's a professional biologist that we paid to go out for a year at night and take notes and do field drawings. She had a dog with her at the same time. And, some form of protection, right? So she goes out and she does her field research. And one night it flew so close to her, she could smell it. This is her description. It smelled like musty hay and musk, both, like wet hay and musk. And then she says, while she smelled this, she looked down and noticed her dog was smelling as well. She could tell he was smelling it as well. Very interesting. The only experience we've ever had in the sense of a scent.
But it wasn't a scent that was foul or enough to make you run, a fear.
The only other time I could think of is in the book called The Bird from Hell. There's a Irishman that married into the native tribes of British Columbia, and he described that when one of the younger ladies, the Indian ladies, was walking up, she thought there was like her brother or young Indian boy was hiding in the brush. So she wanted to call him out. So she just runs up on this assuming young boy that's in the bushes hiding, and it turns out to be a pterosaur, this bird from hell. Well, the bird from hell, as they call it, flew off instantaneously. It flew away and left behind it like smoke, like just a smoke screen. Just flew off and left a smoke screen, sort of like a cuttlefish or an octopus would leave ink behind. But I don't recall any scent for that particular description.
Here's something I want to bring into light. I don't think anyone's asked this. I often wondered what it would take to excavate this mine shaft opening. But as I looked more into this and read this book, it turns out that when Chad Lewis and his team were there, they stood on ground zero where that shaft was. It's all flatland. You have no idea where the mine shaft opening is. You have a concept of where the general area could be, but you can't pinpoint the area, which we could use some new data to find out. We know, like kind of when they track fossils in the earth, they can use this technology to find or pinpoint a location. But as I was reading more, as you were reading some of this information towards the end, it seems that this is a very dangerous shaft. You could dig and it could get dangerous, and you could let loose some sort of toxin, who knows what. So I often wondered what it would take to do an archaeological dig to uncover this, to see if maybe there are remnants of these creatures remains still down there, but who knows where they are. We're talking about looking for a needle in a haystack. So that was a big question for a lot of people. Could we potentially take on this task? The current owners of the property are willing to chat with people. They remain as Family X. Their name has not been disclosed. Okay? Willing to chat with people, not willing for anything to take place on their land. They're the current owners. They have to abide by their wishes. But I just thought about that. I'm like, what would it take to find out? But is it worth the investment? This is going to be very costly. Who would be willing to open up their wallets to an excavation like this, to an archaeological dig? Jolina Walker, or Welker, is the historian and librarian for Van Meter. And I actually called her, left her a voicemail message. I'm hoping she gets back to me. I was hoping she could shed some light on the current owners and see their personal take on this. They were quite excited when Chad Lewis's team arrived on site. They were eager to help, but they kind of found it there's a bit of the part of people who are saying, hey, I'm very skeptical of that. That's fine. Nothing wrong with healthy skepticism. Okay. It's kind of like us saying when we were in Arkansas and we went to a certain area and we said, hey, we're investigators. And they kind of looked at us like, there's no pterosaurs here. It's like that. But they were curious. They were curious by the team that and the plans that were, unveiled to look into the situation. But yeah, they're not open to anything happening on their property. They're the owners. So, but it is a question that I have to ask, because as exciting as it could potentially be to unveil what's there. Imagine that. But I don't think we ever will. I don't think we'll ever find out what happened. But if you go to Van Meter now, you will find the remnants of the brick and tile factory. Things that start to come alive. And to this day, there are hauntings, supernatural activity that abounds these areas. People still say they hear screams, loud screams emanating from the dark, the night. They've seen figures, ghostly figures. Combination of things, from the parapsychology to the cryptozoological. Yeah, but I'm convinced now.
You and I should go to Van Meter.
That
we should go there during September. Yeah. Don't say who we are, and just go there and let them give us the tour. I would love to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we should do that, Garth. I think we're up for that adventure. To wrap this up, though, I want to get your personal opinion. What is this creature?
Well, it overlaps a lot with Pterosaur. I see the spiritual aspects. I can see that explained with what this creature's capable of. In the East, where, in Papua New Guinea and various places that have these creatures, they tend to look at these creatures as spirits. But they accept the fact that they can be physical. So they just don't have a problem with it. Yeah, it could be they're a spirit, but yeah, they're still physical and they could hurt you and they this and that. Here, because we don't believe in spirits, because we're so given to the atheistic mindset, spirits don't manifest, there's no demonic realm or anything like that. We just kind of have modern society in the West tends to lean towards UFO, aliens from another planet somewhere. And I think they're both stretching. So the spiritual aspects to what we heard in this story, I think the pterosaur covers. It can produce a light, faint glow and look ghost-like. It can produce a very bright light, the ones I'm familiar with, not just on the head, but any particular place on its body, its shoulder, its chest, its back. It could make a very bright light. And then it could be completely black or dark. and not produce any light, and everything in between. One of the names in one of the last places I was in Papua New Guinea, they called the creature Pelusumaya, and it means to appear, and then they say there's a connotation to mean to appear and to disappear.
It's unfortunate that the word pterosaur is not mentioned over and over in this book, that it wasn't really even looked at. It was just surface was scratched with it. It's too bad. But then again, we're entering a different field, you and I. We have chosen to take on pterosaurs as our research, where everybody else tends to go more towards the Sasquatch or other things. So it's good to have different opinions on it, but I truly feel that was overlooked. But anyway, glad you could be here to share the information. Love hearing about the information that you have and the stories that you have. This is a research that everybody needs to hear and continue to hear. So thank you again. I love having you on this network, and you will be always welcome here. And I hope that you'll continue to be a guest.
It's an honor to be your friend, and awesome to be on your show. Thank you very much.
All right, sir. Until next time.
Folks, thank you so much for watching the Ropen Network on CC Media, YouTube, and Rumble. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to listen to the full, non-condensed audio alternative, head over to our Spotify for Podcasters account, which you can find in the link directly below. In the meantime, seek the truth, and we will see you next time on the RRN.